Sir, can you tell us what made you decide to come to Lincoln as a student those days?
Yes. When I arrived in the United States in 1925, I was not qualified to enter any university. As a matter of fact, I was studying for my London matriculation. At that time, I got through Western Boys High School, now Methodist Boys High School, and the highest class there was for Junior Cambridge. So I entered Storer College, which was a junior college, and I took certain courses. And one in particular was American history. I never studied American history, I studied English history, and no modern European history, but at an elementary level. So when I took these courses, then I studied the causes of the Civil War, 1863 or thereabouts, and then when Abraham Lincoln was president. And I read most of his speeches and his writings, and he kept on talking about equality of the human race, equality of Americans, that the American Constitution was made to apply to all citizens, irrespective of their status in life or their race or their language or their culture. Well, then I was 21, young, it's true, but this made an impression on me. And I said, well, that if I were able to get through and obtain admission into any university, that a place like Lincoln would help me. And because I realized that my country was then a colony, and I wanted that country, Nigeria, to be free, but I did not want any revolution or bloodshed. I said it has never helped any country in history, and I don't see why it should. And as a young man, naturally, my knowledge of history was limited, but I became a voracious reader of anything about Abraham Lincoln. I kept that in mind, but I had to face the fact that I came to the United States to work my way through college because I didn't have sufficient funds. My father worked in the Nigeria regiment as a first-class clerk, but when I worried him that I wanted to go abroad to study, he decided to retire and drew his gratuity, £300, and gave the whole to me to pay my fare, take care of my first year at Storer College. So I had to work at Storer College in various capacities as a janitor, as a dishwasher. And I was in that, I was able to appreciate what Lincoln meant when he was said to be the friend of the common man. And I also worked in the farm, the college farm. We had a horse called Tube, and a reverend, one of the ministers of the gospel, was the head farmer, and he taught me how to handle the horse to plow. And so I said, come on, Tube, and the horse will be plowing accordingly. So I said, well, Abraham Lincoln must have suffered a lot because he worked his way through school, and he came from parents who were not very wealthy. But I kept that in the background and paid attention to my studies. But these practical problems and what I did impressed me a great deal, and I said I should know more of this man, that a university was named after him. I was thinking of a university that I would attend, but I hadn't the funds. So I remained in Storer College. I enrolled there in September 1925. And in 1926, I finished my college and my high school course, and then I continued because of lack of funds, because it was a junior college. So my first year in the university I spent there, and I took more courses on Abraham Lincoln. And in one of these courses, I read his Gettysburg Address, where he spoke of 10 years ago, our fathers landed upon this shore, and created a country or something like that. They established a government of the people, for the people, by the people. Well, that impressed me a lot. I said, well, that is democracy. A government of the people, for the people, by the people. I said, well, not at home. We have a government of the people, for the people, by colonial masters, colonial rulers. I said, that will be changed, not by me alone, but by society as a whole. But this is a means of obtaining knowledge. And if I went to a university which was named after Lincoln, I might learn more, because that university will be trying to put into practice the ideas of Abraham Lincoln. I continued Stora for the first year. Then I went in June 1927. A friend of mine took me to Pittsburgh. I went there to work. That was the year when Charles Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, and we all praised him. I got a job in one of the chain restaurants there, Gammon restaurant. I resided at the YMCA at 2626, I believe, Center Avenue in Pittsburgh. Then I worked there as a dishwasher, and I found it paid, because as a dishwasher, I had to clear the dishes, and whatever was left, which was good enough, I ate, and then whatever was left in the kitchen, we all helped ourselves. And I found that there was an international community there, because there was a lady there from Belize, Honduras, working there, and there were others from different parts of Latin America, but very few from Africa, you see. So I stayed there for a while, and then got a job at Van. They were building a road. Van there, about 10 miles, 6 or 10 miles from Pittsburgh. I went there. The pay was higher, and I worked there too with other laborers. And then there was a time when they said that some of the miners were on strike, and the miners were required to come and fill their posts. So I left this road-making job, joined and went there. After 2 days, we were shocked when we came to work, and we were faced with what I would call a firing squad. They said that we were strike breakers, that we came to take their jobs from them, and therefore they were going to shoot us. Then I raised my hand. I said I came all the way from Africa. I was a student working my way through college, and that an advertisement was made that there was a vacancy for miners. That's what I came. I didn't know that I was actually a strike breaker. And I'm sure that my colleagues, they were mostly students from various institutions who were working their way through colleges. And so they spared us and told us the best thing to do to leave. So we went and resigned, and we took our pay. We just went, in those days, if you say, go and take your pay, that's all. You go there. And then they will calculate how many days you worked, salary, the wages, and then they pay you. So I got that. I had no other job. And I thought of it, and one day I was invited by the immigration authorities. I was reminded that I entered the United States as a student. And that I told her, well, I had it was holidays, and I just want to keep myself busy, and that I thought that I should work in order to keep myself busy and also have more money to go to school. They said, well, as soon as the first term opens, you should be in school, otherwise you will be deported. Well, at that time, Lincoln continued to operate on a semester system, but Howard operated on a quarter system, and it was November. So I decided that the best thing was to go to Howard, and on the first opportunity, I'll go to Lincoln. So I went to Howard and registered there, entered. They gave me a room in Clark Hall, and my roommate was a Japanese student of dentistry. His name was Yamashita. And the Americans, you know them. They said, no, so long. Not Shita. Oh, you pronounce the first syllable. So, could you go in there? They say, shit. That's lots of fun there. And after there I met Ralph Bunch. Came from California and was teaching political science, my subject. And there was a Professor Tunnell, originally from Trinidad, then settled down in America there, taught us. And he said that the reason why Negroes, as they call African Americans in those days, that's why Negroes were backward, was that they love to eat pork chop. Pork, but Americans call it pork chop. You see, so we used to call it pork chop tunnel. And I said, who has committed this offense? If I discover the fellow who did that, I shall cut his mark off and I shall send him off my class and he will not finish this university. Somebody will say, pork chop! We had lots of fun. However, I remember, and I also met Dr. Allen Locke. He wrote a book, The New Negro. I pointed out that the Negroes should not employ bloody means in order to earn equality, but they should prove by their character and by their contributions to various aspects of American life, and that they will be accepted accordingly. That was his theory. And the NAACP, that is National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, operated in New York under Dr. Du Bois, you see. And he used to come to Howard occasionally to deliver lectures. So it so happened that when I went to, let me not proceed, let me follow chronologically. I continued, then I had no work. Then I met him. I told him that I read his book, and that so he said, where are you from? I said, I'm from Nigeria. He said, where? I said, Nigeria, in West Africa. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm studying. He said, but unfortunately, I do not have sufficient funds. So he said, look, what experience have you? I told him I was a typist, that I was a third-class clerk in the Treasury Department in Nigeria, and that that was all I could do. He gave me something to type. I typed. Then he dictated. Well, I couldn't write shorthand, but he dictated orally, and I took it. Then he drafted some letters. I typed them. So he gave me a job as a typist. I became a private typist to him. So after my classes, I would go to, but he stayed, I think, 1326 Street in Washington, D.C. And I continued. Then when I finished a year in Howard, I applied. When I was about to finish, I applied to Lincoln. I sent my transcript. The first year that I spent at Stora, and then 1.5 years at Stora, and 1.5 years at Howard. Well, Lincoln evaluated this and allowed me 3 years. So when I could come in as a senior. So I went to Lincoln. They asked me, why is it that I didn't want to graduate from Howard? I said, well, I have every respect for Howard. I know that Howard was named after General O.O. Howard, who was one of the leaders of the federal troops during the American Civil War. But that Lincoln was named after someone who was not only president of the United States, but spoke a lot, wrote a lot about the equality of the human race, and also did everything to show that no job is so inferior that one cannot do. And then pointed out that no matter how poor you are, if you are willing to work, and there is work to be done, you should do it. But when you earn your money, you should save still. I learned all this, so I said, well, if that is the case, maybe this university will be put into practice the ideas of this great leader. So I was so happy. I was admitted, and I came in here. Now I found that Thurgood Marshall was one of my classmates. Langston Hughes just left a year before, left before us, so class of 29. And we had just we read his, Willie Blues, a great poet, like County Collin. We read all those things. So I came here, yes.
What was Lincoln University like during your time? In terms of the college life, the academic lives, the fraternity, sorority.
Yes. It was a rural area by this, but it was not well developed. It was not quite developed. It was then run by the Presbyterians. Later on, of course, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania took over. That's how it looked like. But the teachers were dedicated men. It was men. It would open only to men, to male students. Female students were not admitted. And it was just a student body of about 1,200 or so, you see. But there was personal relations, a good relationship between teacher and student, and found out the problems of students and made efforts to improve their welfare. These things all impressed me because I was alone and I had no jobs. I got jobs at Lincoln too as a dishwasher. And I continued with my mates. But then time came for sports. I had done well at Howard in athletics, and I got my letters in swimming at Howard. You see, I took part in swimming. Howard had a beautiful gymnasium and also a swimming pool, and competed with other universities, other institutions of higher learning. And I was the backstroke champion of Howard University. And in the relay, I used to take part in 2 events there. Well, first of all, the freestyle, I will not take part in the first freestyle. There will be freestyle and breaststroke, then backstroke. Well, Howard may be maybe backward, say by about 2-3 years. But as soon as my turn comes with a backstroke, I will be able to cover that and then give a lead of about a yard. And then somebody else will finish one. We'll win. So I became a university swimming champion with the CIA, as they call it, the Intercollegiate Athletic Association. Well, I did that and continued. I made friends with so many. So that last year when I came here for the graduation of one of my children and one of my grandchildren, I couldn't see one of my classmates. Most of them were dead, but some couldn't make it either because of disabilities, physical disabilities or otherwise. But however, the ideals of Lincoln persisted in me, and I kept watching. I noticed the leader, the presidents. They took interest in the personal problems of students and did all they could to help. And so I said, well, that a thing like this is required for my country. And if I'm able to play my own role, I will try to carry it out there and see what could be done to have another Lincoln in Nigeria. Well, so that this, what I've just said, are a combination of the factors which made me to decide to come to Lincoln.
You have lived many great years of service, not only to Africa, but to mankind. How has Lincoln prepared you for this kind of service life that you have lived?
Well, apart from the courses that they offered in the social sciences, they invited great men and women from different parts of life to come to speak to us. And from their speeches, we were able to learn a lot, that we live not for ourselves alone, but we do everything to help our fellow human beings, no matter where they may come from, no matter what may be their race or their language or their culture. These are factors which are very, very essential to humanity at large. And I thought that if we did this, in spite of the backwardness of Africa, that we would begin to improve. Our children will take up from where we left, and their children will carry on. And time will come then when Africa will no longer be just filled with colonies of other nations, but Africans would also be free. So I kept on, I had that faith, but I kept thinking and also pointing out to my friends that effort should be made not to indulge, not to use violence. That was what made me even become interested in the history of India. So much that when I was Governor General, we had to receive Pandit Nehru. In fact, I said, if somebody, a young man wrote a pamphlet here, in Washington, rather, he wrote the pamphlet, and I don't know how he managed to, but he got a photograph. I got the photograph is in my reception room now, but he got a copy of it in his book. I was sitting with Pandit Nehru, we were exchanging views, and again, we were talking about the idea of the government of the people, for the people, by the people. And so we say, if by the people, what is it meant? Then we studied American democracy, the Constitution, what Jefferson and others did in order to have a constitution in 1789 in America that will enable the people of America to govern themselves constitutionally. And I felt that it was necessary to do so. But of course, in those days, it was very difficult because we had few institutions and few high schools, and very few of us could go abroad to study. And when they go to study, well, they study for the professions, law, medicine, surveying, civil engineering, etc. But these are factors which are very, very helpful.
Not long after your graduation from Lincoln in 1930, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana also came here as follow your footsteps. Did you have any influence in this decision to come here?
Thank you for that question, because it brings to my memory what happened to me. When I finished in 1930, I wanted to go to graduate school. I asked Dean Wrigley, who was then in charge of the theological seminary. Then Lincoln had a theological seminary here, and I asked for his advice. He told me to work for a higher degree. I told him I hadn't the funds, but we so said, well, that they could help. I got a job as part-time instructor in the social sciences. I taught political science and some of the social science, some of the subjects in sociology, etc. And in fact, I was surprised yesterday when an elderly man came, greeted me. I became part-time instructor between 1930 and 1933. I was just a part-time instructor. In those days, we had no colored professors. They were all white. And then later on, I think 1933, we had one, Horace Manbun, who ultimately became the first colored president of Lincoln University. But all these things were done in a friendly manner. You see, no quarrel, although you have your usual academic arguments, you see, whether one was able to do this, whether one was capable to do this, and fine, you will use biological points to show one's incapability of doing this, or to use history to show that one has never done so in history. And it was here that I became interested in ancient history to find out the role of the colored races in history. That the word Egypt means black, the word Nile means black, and the reason why these were so. So, as a result of this, do repeat that question again.
The question was that when you graduated from here, Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes, I was coming to that now. Yeah. So I continued it. So I continued like that. I was studying at Penn. I did graduate work at Penn. I taught here, and then went to Penn for graduate work. That's where I got my master's in February 1933. I was studying for a doctorate at Columbia. I was admitted to candidacy, but the demand at home was such that I felt that we should go home to join the struggle. I met a young man from Africa, from a teacher of mine at the Methodist at the Wesley Boys High School. Frank Brown was his name then, but later on he changed it to proper Yoruba name, yes. But then Dr. Akinolamaja, etc., if he could help me obtain employment, well, it wasn't quite possible. So I wrote to A.J. Okansi in Ghana. He was then running a cinema, a theater. But I read in the papers that he wanted to start a paper and was looking for an editor. So I offered myself as an editor because I took some courses in journalism at Columbia, and I did so well during the summer that I became editor of Columbia University Summer Session Times in 1930 after my graduation from Lincoln. So I said, well, I could use that. And in the meantime, during my stay here, my student days, I was correspondent of all the Negro newspapers, and well, I received some money for it. I used to report about movements of their professors and students in the universities. They used them in the columns of the one was Afro-American. I don't know whether I still... Is that so in Baltimore?
In Baltimore?
Yes, Carl Murphy was I think he's dead now. Carl Murphy was the owner and editor at the Material Time. When I finished when I couldn't get any job in Nigeria, and I got in Ghana, I was offered 15 pounds a month. Well, in those days, that meant a lot. I accepted, but I asked that permission to go home and reconcile with my people, see them, and assure them that I was still alive and that I was well, still kicking, and that I would return as soon as I found it possible to do so. So I returned in 1934. When I returned in 1934, they gave me a good reception in Lagos. The Onitsha Improvement Union arranged a reception at the Glover Memorial Hall. And I gave them my experience. I told them that they all had the opportunity and that they will go to America, that they will find out why it is called God's country. God's country. I did that. I felt that it was later in years that I felt that I was really, I advertised America a lot. In any case, what happened was that just as I started the African Morning Post in 1934, one day I was told that a young man wanted to see me. He was one of the students in the normal department of Achimota College. So he came. It was not called Kwame Nkrumah then, it was Kofi Choir. And then later on changed to Kwame Nkrumah. So he said he wanted to study, but that he had me deliver a lecture, said that whether you have money or not, if you have the willpower to study and you go to America, you will find an opportunity to work, but you must not distinguish between whatever you're going to do. If it's one, be laborer. If you want, I told him I was a laborer many years in America, and that it made no difference to my intellectual achievements, and that it helped because it gave me a practical experience to deal with people who are poor or people who are in the lower segments of society. So I told him, I said, if you can do that, I said, you have opportunity. He said, but how? I said, you're right, apply. I said, if you apply, then they'll consider your qualifications. If not, if you're not qualified, they will ask you to take what is equivalent to matriculation. If you finish that, then you can enter. So he had equivalent. So he applied to Lincoln for admission. And Lincoln replied, and he came to my office about 2 months later, full of joy that he'd been admitted as a student at Lincoln. So I said, accept my congratulations. I said, I hope you'll go there, study, and then watch it. Do any kind of work. A laborer, you can work as a laborer. I said, but it would be better for you to work as a dishwasher. I said, then you spend less on what you eat. I said, because So many people, students work in the pantry and in the kitchen. I said, and they have a lot to eat. And so we don't bother about spending money in restaurants or go. Unless when we are on holidays, we go to big towns like Philadelphia or say Wilmington or New York. So I prepared in 1935, came to Lincoln and did everything good so that he graduated in 1939. So he's a member of the class of 39. That's really what brought Nkrumah and I together. When he returned, he came to Nigeria to visit me. I was then premier of the Eastern region, and we have photographs taken. He came with Kojo Botsio, who is a graduate of Cambridge, and K.B. Jones Squatty, who came to, I don't remember what university came, I think it's Howard or so. Then later on went to another university. But that's really what brought us together. And then when he started his nationalist movement in Ghana, he invited me to come over and witness one of their turnouts. I went there, and then I invited myself, look, you're following, you want what you're trying to do now might lead to bloodshed. He said, yes. He said, unless you fight and kill, you will not succeed. So I said, no. I said, well, did Gandhi kill anybody? Did Nehru kill anybody? He said, hey, what, if you don't do that, he said, if you don't do that, they'll kill you. He said, where is Gandhi? I said, and then I told him, I said, well, but Nehru continued, and Nehru became the first prime minister of an independent India. I said, but unfortunately, factors of division entered, and so we have Pakistan. But of course, Pakistan later on experienced the same thing, because now the northern part of Pakistan broke away, and they are separate. This thing. But the main thing was that I made it clear to Nkrumah that we should not use force. He didn't know, they may laugh at us. I said, well, he said, but the British use force. I said, yes. I said, but I have been using my argument with the British. I said, in England, I met some of them, particularly Labour Party. Well, here I had to play politics. The Conservatives were in power. I met some of the Labour leaders. See, one fool later on became Lord Ogmo. Then Reverend Sorensen. That's right, Reverend Sorensen. Then I told them, I said, look, they asked me, how are you going to accomplish your aim? I said, I'm not going to do it alone. I said, it will be teamwork. I said, but what we're going to do is what you and your country did. He said, what? I said, well, I read in English history that in 1066, William the Conqueror of France became the monarch of England. I said, well, when he ruled England, he imported the French ideas. And one of the most important, as far as I was concerned, was that the British found out that the French had all the arms, French soldiers. The British soldiers were all equally armed, of course. But the French, they used arms to accomplish their purpose. But they used to discuss their problems. And after discussing their problems, then they decided what to do. So in French, it's Palmo. I took French, by the way, both historical college at Howard and Lincoln. I took French, so I was able to, but I don't speak it. I read French. And it was, of course, one of the requirements at Columbia when I was studying for PhD. So I said, well, Palmo, speak out your mind. Give out your views. I say, in other words, dialogue. I say, we will use dialogue in Nigeria. We know that we have so many soldiers of Nigerian origin, but they are inferior. In those days, the highest they could get was Sergeant Major. Yes. I said, but by having dialogue with the British, we will not shed blood, and we will not force the British to shoot at us. So I said, that's what the British did. He said, and they looked at each other. I said, yes. I said, that's the original word parliament. Parlement. 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 I said, you did that. And it wasn't long when you got rid with French domination, and you became your own rulers, and you rule your people, and then began to rule others. I said, that's what we're going to do. They said, well, you will succeed. We will back you. That's how I got some friends in the Labour Party. And that's why during the assassination, the story days, they raised the question in Parliament and forced the Colonial Office to make a public denial. And that made it impossible for the government in Nigeria to carry out this sinister plan. They wanted then to have me assassinated during the general strike of 1945 when we were fighting for independence. So these are some of the factors which made me and Nkrumah, you see, play a very important part in Ghana and Nigeria.
Although it's been over 60 years that you have helped Lincoln, and you have actually helped
65 years exactly. That's a class of 30.
Yeah. And you have helped many Nigerians to come and study at Lincoln. Still, in the 80s, you sent grandchildren here. Your last son just graduated this year. What keep motivating you to send the Azikiwes to Lincoln?
Well, I had two wives. My first wife died, and then I had this one. But my first son graduated from Harvard in business administration, and he got his master's degree there. He's now at home, living in Lagos, doing his own business with an Italian group. My second son is now number 2 in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Abuja. Well, I was then Premier of Eastern Region, and we were planning to start a university. And the president of Michigan State University helped a great deal. Those were the days of the Peace Corps. And so I was able to use the Peace Corps, you see, to help us have the original teachers that we needed. Well, when this happened, so my second son went to Michigan State. Now, first of all, he went through the cooperation of the American ambassador, Sarah Palmer, who is a Harvard graduate who helped to get my first son into Harvard. My second son was not as brilliant as the first son, but he got to University of New Hampshire in New England. But it was so cold that he asked me that I should do everything possible to take him out there. And then he dressed himself like an Eskimo. He said, well, that most of the students who came from abroad, you see, had to wear Eskimo dresses. You see, so later I wrote to him, I said, well, do you live in dormitories or in igloos as the Eskimos? He said that this is not a matter of humor. He said that he would like to, he was doing well in the University of New Hampshire because I went there and saw the president and chatted with him, and then went over there. Well, unfortunately, he couldn't continue. After the first year, he had to change. What happened was that I got President John Hanna of Michigan State University, who was helping us to build this University of Nigeria. You see, I spoke to him. He said, well, if the young man is qualified, it's all right, he might as well come to Michigan State. So he went to Michigan State University, and he graduated from there and came to Johns Hopkins University, the campus in Washington. The main university was in Baltimore, but he went to the campus in Washington and studied diplomacy and international relations. So later on joined the Nigerian Foreign Service. He's now number 2 in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs at Abuja. My third son also qualified and went to Harvard. He graduated from Harvard, then went to Yeshiva University in New York and became a medical practitioner. Well, so far for the children of my first wife. And then she died. And she died, well, we finished, and then I had my second wife. My second wife, incidentally, studied at the university which I founded. That's this University of Nigeria, you see. And in 1992, she got a PhD there. She got a PhD there. And, but in the meantime, we got these two sons, Moloku and Owahwe, educated them. And I told them, they asked for advice. Should they go to English University? I said, well, if you want to, you can go. I said, but English University is very good. I said, well, for professionals, if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, I said, but you want to be of service to humanity at large, and you want to be a leader and produce more leaders who will help to make things better for the so-called common man. And they say, you got to think of universities in America. So this is all right. What universities would I suggest? So I told her, I said, Harvard is well known, and many of the universities in New England and other parts of the United States are well known. I said, but I may be accused of jealousy. I said, but I feel that Lincoln University will be a place where you will go, you will face the realities of life, and meet with friends from different parts of the world, and then listen to practical men and women who have practical ideas as to how to make the world a better place. Well, so her first son, came here. That was Moloku, who graduated last year. And that's why he came here in 1990. The gentleman who brought your message to me was asked by me to be kind enough to act as a shepherd. So it followed him from home, brought him here, and he came and became a student, then graduated last year. Then,
so you have sent your grandchildren and their children to Lincoln, and the last one just graduated, this past Sunday. What motivates you in sending them to Lincoln University?
The ideals of Lincoln. I said, well, when you go to Lincoln, you'll find out that Lincoln carries out the ideals of Abraham Lincoln. I said, well, our country is in need of leadership of this type. I said, because we fought for independence, we got it. But after 34 years of independence, we found out that it's only 9 years or 8 years that the civilian sector of the population ruled. The rest was manipulated by the military. Well, we want to change it, but it will be impossible for us to do so because we're not armed. And even if we're armed, of what purpose is it that we should kill each other? We asked the British to go. We didn't fight them. We had dialogue with them. So I said, come. I was thinking in my mind, if you come here, they will see in action the ideals of Abraham Lincoln. They will learn of Abraham Lincoln. They will see how the university is run. They'll meet students from different parts of the world, and they will, thank God they've changed now their policy so that the university is open to white and black, male and female, so that they will actually see fellow human beings struggling to make this earth a better place. I said, well, if they remain in Lincoln for 4 years and they could have their graduate studies, well, Moloku is studying at the University of Illinois, Champaign. Well, this one will soon study wherever. I don't know where he will go, but he wants to study law because he's specialized in jurisprudence. I said, if you do that, it's to make Nigeria a better place. To come back, let's have a government of the people, by the people, for the people, but not for a particular sector of the people, and not no particular group in Nigeria should dominate our political scene, you see, simply because they have control of the armed forces. It's as simple as that. That's what I thought that I said, well, if Lincoln could help make me realize that it is worthless shedding blood. Why should my children, my grandchildren, shed blood, encourage shedding of blood? It leads to nowhere. But we can use dialogue. And if we want to use the dialogue, let us apply the ideals and the ideas of Abraham Lincoln. With me, it is not only Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln influenced me to come here. But one who influenced me to come to America, what made me feel that it's God's country, is James A. Garfield. You see, in my last year at the Methodist Boys High School, was then Boys High School, I got a prize. I was the prize winner of my class, and Lord Lugard was then the Governor General of Nigeria. And the prize given there at the Glover Memorial Hall, he gave me a book, From Log Cabin to White House. I was a poor fellow who was born in the log cabin of Ohio, one of the towns in Ohio. And he developed, walked his way through secondary school, walked his way through university, and later on joined the American Army, walked his way to the top and became a general, later on became a president, from log cabin to White House. And that's really what made me want to study in America. So I said, well, if one can be born in the bush and work hard as a boy, and then later on finished his secondary school, went to university, walked his way there, he was not ashamed, and then later on got to the top in the army, and then apart from that, was selected as a candidate when there was vacancy after the Civil War. I said, well, it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile, and that country is worthwhile. And so when I came here and began to hear the talk of God's country, I said, well, this is really God's country.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate
your And once again, I appreciate you having me listen. I wish you a safe journey back home.
Thank you.
And wish you more happy years.
Thank you.
Yeah. Being the father of the nation.
Pray to God to make your wishes come true. Come to pass.